The Grand Council Hall was the largest building ever created by intelligent life. Its ceiling disappeared into darkness hundreds of meters above the floor. Giant marble pillars reached toward the roof like mountains. Blue holographic screens floated between them, showing the flags and symbols of more than 300 star nations. Thousands of representatives filled the seats that surrounded the circular chamber. This was where wars ended. This was where empires were born. And today, everyone believed this was where humanity would finally surrender. The room buzzed with quiet conversation. Alien reporters adjusted their recording drones. Military officers stood beside politicians. Wealthy traders waited to see what would happen next. Every eye remained fixed on the massive silver doors at the end of the chamber. "They're late," one senator whispered. "They're probably afraid," another answered with a laugh. Across the hall, Commander Varkan sat on a black throne surrounded by armored guards. His dark armor looked like it had been forged from living metal. Sharp spikes covered his shoulders. A long black cape rested behind him. His face carried only one emotion: confidence. For 6 months, his empire had surrounded human space with warships. Trade routes were blocked. Colonies were isolated. Every news station in the galaxy predicted the same result. Humanity would surrender today. Varkan smiled. They finally understand who rules this galaxy. Suddenly, the giant silver doors opened. The room became completely silent. Everyone expected hundreds of human soldiers. Instead, only one person walked inside. A human man. No guards. No weapons. No military parade. He wore a simple dark navy uniform with only one small silver badge on his chest. Captain Elias Ward. His boots echoed softly across the polished floor. Thousands of eyes followed him. Nobody spoke. Some aliens looked confused. Others laughed. One human. That's all they sent? Maybe the rest surrendered already. The laughter spread through the chamber. Elias never looked toward them. His face remained calm. He walked with steady confidence until reaching the center of the hall. Then he stopped. He folded his hands behind his back and quietly waited. The silence felt strange. It was as if he already knew something nobody else did. Commander Varkan slowly stood. The heavy sound of his armor echoed across the chamber. "So," Varkan said loudly, "this is humanity's greatest representative?" His voice carried through every corner of the hall. Elias nodded once. "I represent Earth. Nothing more. No speech. No excuses. No fear." The short answer made several council members exchange nervous looks. Varkan laughed. "A single man represents an entire species?" Elias answered calmly. "Today, yes." More laughter filled the room. An insect-like ambassador leaned toward another delegate. "Humans truly have lost hope." A reptilian general smiled. "They're smarter than I expected. At least they know resistance is useless." Varkan slowly walked down the long staircase from his throne. Each step echoed through the chamber. His guards followed behind him. When he reached the floor, he continued walking directly toward Elias. The distance between them became shorter. 20 meters. 15. 10. The entire council watched without blinking. Varkan stopped only inches away from the human. He was much taller. His shadow covered Elias completely. "You know why you're here?" Elias looked directly into his glowing red eyes. "To give peace one final chance." The answer erased every smile from Varkan's face. "Peace?" His voice became colder. "My fleets surround your worlds. My soldiers outnumber yours. My empire controls half the galaxy. You are in no position to speak about peace." Elias remained perfectly still. "Power wins battles." He paused. "Wisdom prevents them." Several diplomats lowered their heads. Even some imperial officers looked uncomfortable. Varkan's jaw tightened. "You still speak like equals. We speak as neighbors." That single sentence spread through the chamber like electricity. Nobody had ever answered Varkan that way. Not kings. Not admirals. Not entire civilizations. The commander leaned closer. You humans never learn. Elias quietly replied, We learn very quickly. The silence became heavy. Something about the humans' confidence made many representatives nervous. There were no weapons. No visible soldiers. No threats. Yet somehow, the calm human felt more dangerous than an army. Varkan raised his voice again. Tell me, Captain, what happens if I reject your peace? Elias answered immediately. Then history chooses another path. The words sounded simple, but something about them made several council members glance at each other. Even Varkan's chief advisor frowned. He had studied humanity for years. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. He stepped forward. Commander, perhaps negotiations should continue. Varkan ignored him. Instead, he smiled. A cruel smile. I've heard enough. Without warning, he lifted one armored hand. Crack. The sound exploded across the chamber. His metal glove struck Elias across the face with incredible force. The human staggered one step sideways. A thin line of blood appeared beside his mouth. Complete silence followed. For one heartbeat, nobody moved. The laughter erupted across the council hall. Some representatives stood and applauded. Others pointed toward the human. Even several reporters laughed while recording everything. The mighty humans. One strike. Pathetic. Commander Varkan spread his arms proudly. Let every world witness this. This is the strength of humanity. Elias slowly turned his head back toward Varkan. His cheek was red. Blood rested on his lip. He gently wiped it away with one finger. He looked at the blood for only a second. Then, something unexpected happened. He smiled. Not a nervous smile. Not an angry smile. A calm smile. Almost a relieved one. The laughter slowly faded. Several council members noticed the strange expression. Varkan's smile disappeared. Why are you smiling? Elias looked directly at him. His voice stayed soft. You just made your decision. Varkan frowned. I made mine long before today. Elias reached into his jacket. Instantly dozens of Imperial guards aimed their weapons. But he pulled out only a small silver communicator, no larger than his hand. He pressed one button. The device glowed blue. Thousands of people watched without making a sound. Elias spoke only 6 words. Permission granted. Execute protocol Iron Fall. The transmission ended. He placed the communicator back into his pocket. Nothing happened. The chamber remained silent. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. Commander Varkan burst into loud laughter. That's it? Was that supposed to frighten me? Soon the entire council laughed again. Some diplomats shook their heads. Others rolled their eyes. One reporter whispered, The human is bluffing. Another answered, Poor man. He has nothing left. Elias never reacted. He simply stood there, watching, waiting. Exactly 5 seconds later, every holographic screen inside the Grand Council Hall suddenly turned bright crimson. Warning! 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 Emergency alarms screamed through the building. Lights flashed red. Military officers jumped to their feet. Council members looked around in panic. The laughter vanished instantly. A mechanical voice echoed across the chamber. Priority alert. Unknown human fleet has entered Imperial space. The room froze. Then another message appeared. Over 12,000 unidentified human warships detected. One officer whispered in disbelief. Impossible. Another screen changed. Then another. Then another. Reports flooded in from every direction. Entire Imperial border fleets had suddenly gone silent. Long-range sensors detected thousands of human ships appearing from hidden jump routes no one knew existed. Commander Varkan's confident smile slowly disappeared. For the first time in many years, fear entered his eyes. Captain Elias Ward quietly looked around the silent chamber. Then he spoke only one sentence. Humanity came here seeking peace, but you chose something else. The Grand Council Hall fell completely silent. And across the galaxy, the war had already begun. The Grand Council Hall remained frozen. No one spoke. The red warning lights continued to flash across the enormous chamber. Every holographic screen displayed the same terrifying message. Unknown human fleets detected. The laughter that had filled the room only seconds earlier had completely disappeared. Instead, fear slowly replaced it. Military officers rushed toward the floating displays, reading the incoming reports again and again. It has to be a mistake. No fleet can appear inside Imperial space without being detected. Our sensors would have seen them. An elderly alien admiral shook his head. They didn't appear. His voice trembled. They were already there. Those words spread through the chamber like cold wind. Commander Varkon stared at the glowing screens. His confident smile was gone. He looked toward Captain Elias Ward, who still stood quietly in the center of the hall. The human showed no excitement, no anger, no celebration, only calm. That calm frightened Varkon more than any weapon. An Imperial communications officer suddenly shouted, "Commander! We've lost contact with Border Fleet 7. Another voice followed. Fleet 9 is reporting unknown ships surrounding them. Then another. Emergency signal from the Orion Gate. Within seconds, dozens of officers began speaking at once. The chamber became complete chaos. Council members stood from their seats. Some demanded answers. Others tried contacting their own governments. The peaceful meeting had become a military crisis. Varkon slammed his armored fist against a stone table. Silence. The room became quiet once again. He turned toward Elias. "What did you do?" The human answered without hesitation. "Nothing." Varkon's eyes narrowed. "You expect me to believe that? I activated no weapons." "You activated something." "I followed our law." The simple answer confused many representatives. "Our law," one ambassador whispered. "What law?" Across the chamber, a small gray-skinned diplomat slowly stood from his seat. His name was Ambassador Relis. Unlike most species, his people had studied human history for nearly 200 years. His face suddenly became pale. "I know that phrase." Everyone looked toward him. Relis swallowed nervously. "Protocol Iron Fall." The room became silent again. Commander Varkon frowned. "You know what it is?" Relis nodded slowly. "Only the rumors." Varkon folded his arms. "Then explain." The ambassador took a deep breath. Long before humanity joined the Galactic Council, they sent peace envoys to negotiate with several hostile civilizations. He paused. 3 of those envoys were murdered during diplomatic meetings. The room listened carefully. The attacks shocked Earth. The humans believed diplomacy had become a battlefield. Another ambassador interrupted. "So," Relis continued, "they changed their military laws forever." The holographic screen behind him displayed ancient human records that had just been unlocked from public archives. The title read, Protocol Iron Fall. Many representatives had never seen the document before. Relis continued reading. If an officially protected human peace envoy is physically attacked during formal negotiations, the attack is legally recognized by humanity as a declaration of unrestricted war. Silence. Nobody breathed. Several younger diplomats looked confused. "That's impossible. No civilization would create such a law." Relis looked at them sadly. "They already did." Another page appeared. It had been signed almost 300 years earlier. Every human government had accepted it. Every military branch had sworn to follow it. Every human ambassador carried the same protection. Commander Varkon laughed. A forced laugh. "So one old document starts a war?" Relis slowly shook his head. "No. Your strike did." Varkon's expression hardened. "I slapped one man." "You struck the legal voice of humanity." The sentence echoed through the chamber. Even Varkon's own advisors became uneasy. One of them stepped closer. "Commander, I recommended we avoid physical contact." Varkon glared at him. "You believe this nonsense?" "I believed humans always mean what they write." Another emergency report interrupted them. A large star map appeared above the council floor. Thousands of bright blue lights suddenly became visible. Gasps spread across the room. Every blue light represented a human fleet. But something was wrong. They weren't entering Imperial territory. They were already positioned around it. Entire battle groups surrounded important trade routes, defense stations, fuel depots, communication relays, jump gates. For years, no one had noticed them. An old naval officer whispered, "They've been preparing." Another answered quietly, "For how long?" No one knew. Meanwhile, Captain Elias remained perfectly still. One young reporter gathered enough courage to approach him. "Captain." Elias looked toward her. "Were these fleets hidden before today?" "Yes." "For how many years?" The human looked at the star map. "A long time." "You expected this war?" "No." "Then why prepare?" His answer surprised everyone. "We prepared because we hoped we would never need them." The reporter frowned. "I don't understand." Elias spoke slowly. "Preparation prevents panic. If peace fails, our people deserve time." Those simple words spread across every live broadcast in the galaxy. Millions of civilians were watching. Many expected humanity to celebrate. Instead, their representatives sounded disappointed, almost sad. Far away, inside Earth's High Defense Command, massive underground doors slowly opened. Hidden shipyards came to life. Thousands of workers calmly followed prepared schedules. No one shouted. No one ran. Everything happened with quiet precision. Artificial intelligence systems activated. Long lines of battleships began leaving underground docks. Supply ships departed first. Medical vessels followed. Engineering fleets moved next. Only then did the warships begin launching. Human commanders watched silently. One officer asked, "Has the Empire fired?" The answer came immediately. "No." Another officer asked, "Then why move now?" The fleet marshal looked toward a large screen showing Captain Elias standing inside the council hall. "He gave peace every chance. He fulfilled his duty. Now we fulfill ours." Back inside the council, Commander Varkan still refused to believe what he was seeing. He pointed directly at Elias. "You planned this." The human calmly shook his head. "No. You wanted war." "No. You threatened the Empire." "No." Varkan's voice echoed across the chamber. "Then why is your fleet moving?" For the first time, Captain Elias' calm expression became serious. He looked directly into the commander's eyes. "Because you did exactly what every warning told you not to do." Those words struck harder than any weapon. Around the chamber, several ambassadors slowly lowered their heads. Some remembered ignoring humanity's requests to recognize diplomatic protections. Others remembered laughing whenever humans mentioned Protocol Ironfall. Now, no one was laughing. Outside the council station, hundreds of emergency ships launched into space. Across the galaxy, military networks lit up with one impossible realization. Humanity had not reacted in anger. Humanity had reacted according to a plan written centuries ago. And Commander Varkan had just become the man who activated it. The news spread across the galaxy faster than light. Every military network, every government, every trading station, every civilian broadcast. Only one message filled the screens. Unknown human fleets detected across Imperial territory. Fear followed the message. For years, the Empire believed it knew everything about humanity. Every colony had been mapped. Every fleet had been counted. Every shipyard had been watched. Now that belief was falling apart. Inside the Imperial War Command, hundreds of officers stood around a giant holographic map of the galaxy. Bright red lights marked Imperial forces. Blue lights marked known human fleets. More blue lights appeared. 100. Then thousands. The computer could barely keep up. An officer looked at the display in disbelief. "Commander, these ships weren't on any of our records." Another officer checked the intelligence files. No construction reports. No supply movements. No energy signatures. It is as if they appeared from empty space. Supreme Fleet Marshal Korvac slowly stepped toward the map. He had fought wars for over 70 years. He had defeated 8 civilizations. But today, his hand shook. Zoom in, he ordered. The map focused on a lonely asteroid belt near the Imperial border. The officers expected to see empty rocks. Instead, the asteroid belt opened. Massive steel doors separated. Entire mountains moved. Hidden inside them were giant shipyards. Battleships slowly emerged from the darkness. Thousands of workers guided them with perfect order. No panic. No confusion. Everything looked as though it had been practiced hundreds of times. Silence filled the command room. One young officer whispered, "How long has that been there?" Nobody answered. Because nobody knew. Far away, deep beneath Earth's largest military headquarters, Captain Elias walked through a quiet underground corridor. He had already left the Galactic Council. His mission was over. Human officers saluted as he passed. None of them smiled. None of them celebrated. One young lieutenant finally spoke. "Sir." Elias stopped. "Were you hurt?" The lieutenant looked at the bruise on his face. "It will heal." "But you let him strike you." Elias looked through a large window. Beyond it stood hundreds of human officers calmly preparing fleets. "He didn't strike me." The lieutenant looked confused. "He struck the peace we offered." The young officer remained silent. Only now did he fully understand. Commander Varkon had returned to his flagship. The bridge was no longer calm. Alarms echoed through every hallway. Crew members ran between control stations. Navigation officers shouted coordinates. Communications specialists tried contacting missing fleets. Nothing worked. Every report sounded worse than the last. "Commander, the Orion supply route has gone silent." Another officer turned around. "The 7th fuel depot has stopped responding." Then another. "We've lost communication with 3 border stations." Varkon slammed both hands onto the command table. "They haven't fired a shot." "Then why are we losing everything?" No one answered. Because the Empire was not losing battles. It was losing information. At that same moment, hidden inside a quiet human station, Admiral Sophia Kane watched dozens of holographic screens. She commanded the Shadow Fleet. A force so secret that even most humans believed it did not exist. An engineer looked toward her. "Admiral, enemy sensors are scanning every sector." Sophia nodded. "They're searching for ships." She smiled slightly. "They should be searching for patterns." The engineer looked puzzled. Sophia enlarged the galaxy map. Every human fleet moved slowly. None attacked. None invaded. Instead, each fleet stopped beside an important Imperial location. Trade gates, fuel stations, communication towers, navigation satellites. The engineer finally understood. "We're surrounding them." Sophia nodded. "We don't need to destroy an empire. We only need to stop it from moving." Inside the Galactic Council, representatives continued watching the live military reports. No one had left. Everyone wanted to know what humanity would do next. An elderly historian quietly stood. He belonged to one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy. His people remembered wars long forgotten. "I've seen this before." Several delegates looked toward him. He pointed toward the tactical map. "Not these ships. These strategies." The room listened carefully. Ancient Earth generals once defeated larger armies without fighting every battle. They removed supplies. They broke communication. They forced stronger enemies to defeat themselves. Another delegate frowned. "So humanity is repeating ancient history?" The historian nodded. "On a galactic scale." Hours passed. Still, human fleets fired almost no weapons. Instead, Imperial cargo ships began disappearing. Not destroyed. Captured. Fuel transports suddenly changed direction. Medical convoys vanished into secure human space. Communication relays stopped broadcasting. Entire sectors became isolated. One Imperial captain shouted into his communicator, "Requesting orders." Only static answered. Another captain tried contacting headquarters. Nothing. Navigation systems suddenly displayed different star routes. Ships accidentally traveled into empty regions of space. The Empire possessed enormous strength. But strength without communication became useless. Commander Varkon watched another report arrive. His face grew darker. Our outer fleets have enough weapons, but not enough fuel. Another report appeared. Our reserve ammunition has disappeared. Another. Food convoys have been intercepted. Then another. Our repair stations are offline. Varkon stared silently. Finally he whispered, "They're cutting our legs before the race even begins." No officer replied. Because it was true. Meanwhile, Earth remained strangely peaceful. Children still attended school. Farmers continued harvesting crops. Factories continued producing supplies. Families gathered for dinner. People knew war had begun. Yet panic never spread. Emergency shelters opened. Medical centers prepared. Volunteers arrived without being asked. The government had trained for this day for generations. Preparation replaced fear. Back aboard Admiral Sophia Kane's flagship, a communications officer smiled. Report from Logistics Command. Sophia looked up. Read it. Every civilian colony has received enough food for 6 months. Another message arrived. Medical supplies delivered. Another. Evacuation routes confirmed. Sophia nodded with quiet satisfaction. Good. The officer looked surprised. We're not celebrating? Sophia looked through the bridge window toward the stars. There is nothing to celebrate. We failed. The officer blinked. We're winning. Sophia slowly shook her head. No. If diplomacy had succeeded, none of this would be necessary. The bridge became silent. Every officer understood. Humanity had prepared for war. But none of them had wanted it. Far across the galaxy, Commander Varkon finally received a direct transmission. The screen activated. Captain Elias appeared. Still calm. Still standing. The bruise on his face had darkened. Neither man spoke for several seconds. Finally Varkon broke the silence. You've trapped my empire. Elias answered quietly. No. You trapped it yourself. You planned every move. We planned for every possibility. Varkon clenched his fists. You knew this day would come. Elias looked directly into his eyes. No. We hoped it never would. He paused before speaking one final sentence. But hope is never allowed to replace preparation. The transmission ended. Varkon remained standing in complete silence. For the first time in his long military career, he realized something terrifying. Humanity had not spent decades preparing to conquer the galaxy. They had spent decades preparing for the moment someone forced them to defend it. And now, the entire empire had become the lesson. The war had entered its 4th day. Across the galaxy, everyone expected explosions. They expected giant space battles. They expected burning planets and millions of ships crashing into each other. Instead, the galaxy witnessed something far more terrifying. Nothing. No great battles. No endless streams of missiles. No heroic last stands. Only silence. And that silence was slowly destroying the largest empire ever built. Inside the Imperial High Command, the atmosphere had become unbearable. Hundreds of officers stared at tactical displays that changed every few seconds. Each update brought worse news. A communications officer spoke first. Commander, we've restored contact with the 4th Fleet. Commander Varkon looked up. Finally. The officer hesitated. They're alive. But they have no fuel. Another officer interrupted. The 9th Fleet has ammunition, but no food. A logistics commander added another report. The Western shipyards are fully operational. Varkon nodded. Good. The officer lowered his head. They cannot build anything. We have no titanium shipments. Silence spread across the bridge. The Empire still owned thousands of powerful warships. Yet every fleet lacked something different. Fuel, food, medicine, replacement parts, navigation codes, communication links. Nothing worked together anymore. It was as if an invisible hand had quietly separated every piece of the Imperial machine. Millions of light-years away. Aboard the human flagship Resolute, Admiral Sophia Kane watched the same reports. Unlike the Imperial bridge, hers was completely calm. Nobody shouted. Nobody celebrated. Officers quietly compared information while engineers updated fleet movements. Sophia looked toward her operations chief. Status. The officer answered immediately. Phase 3 is complete. Our fleets now control 92% of the Empire's major supply routes. Any resistance? Very little. Casualties? The officer checked his screen. None. Sophia simply nodded. Continue. A young cadet standing nearby looked confused. He finally gathered enough courage to ask, Admiral. She turned toward him. Yes. Why don't we attack? Our fleets could destroy them now. Several senior officers looked toward the young cadet. Sophia smiled slightly. A broken bridge doesn't need another bomb. The cadet frowned. I don't understand. She enlarged the holographic star map. Red Imperial systems filled the display. Thin golden lines connected every colony. Trade routes, fuel lines, medical transports, civilian supply corridors. Sophia gently touched the map. This is the Empire. Then every golden line slowly disappeared. Only isolated red dots remained. She looked back at the cadet. Ships don't build empires. Connections do. The young officer finally understood. Humanity wasn't destroying worlds. They were disconnecting them. Far away, a massive Imperial battleship floated beside an empty refueling station. Its captain stared through the bridge window. Nothing moved. No supply ships. No workers. No repair crews. Only darkness. His communicator suddenly activated. This is Fleet Command. The captain answered quickly. We need fuel immediately. A tired voice replied. We know. When will it arrive? A long silence followed. Finally came the answer. It won't. The transmission ended. The captain slowly sat down. His crew looked at him. No one needed to ask the question. Everyone already knew. The battleship had become a prison. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council held another emergency meeting. Unlike before, the hall was nearly empty. Many ambassadors had already returned home to protect their own systems. Those who remained watched hundreds of live military feeds. An elderly historian quietly spoke. I've studied 6,000 years of galactic warfare. He pointed toward the screens. I have never seen anything like this. Another delegate nodded. They're winning without conquering. The scientist added. The human fleets only attack military logistics. They avoid hospitals. They avoid civilian colonies. They even escort refugee ships. Several ambassadors exchanged surprised looks. One reporter asked, why would they protect enemy civilians? The historian answered softly, because they're fighting an army, not a population. The room became silent again. Inside one imperial colony, families waited inside emergency shelters. Parents held frightened children. Rumors spread everywhere. The humans are coming. They'll destroy the city. They'll take revenge. Hours passed. Nothing happened. Instead, a convoy of silver transport ships entered orbit. People expected bombs. Instead, thousands of supply containers landed. Food, water, medicine. Attached to every container was the same message. For civilian use only. Not a military target. The colony governor stared at the message. This doesn't make sense. Nearby, an old woman quietly smiled. Maybe. They're exactly who they claim to be. Back aboard Commander Varkin's flagship, another emergency meeting had begun. His senior generals stood around the command table. Every face looked exhausted. Marshal Korvac finally broke the silence. We cannot continue like this. Varkon looked at him. Our fleets still outnumber theirs. Korvac nodded. Yes. But numbers no longer matter. He pointed toward the tactical display. Our ships cannot receive orders. They cannot repair damage. They cannot refuel. They cannot even find each other. Another general spoke. We train to fight battles, not starvation. A younger commander slammed his fist onto the table. Then let's attack Earth. Korvac immediately shook his head. With what fuel? The young officer said nothing, because there was no answer. On Earth. Captain Elias Ward stood inside the Human Defense Council. Large windows overlooked the blue planet below. The same bruise still marked his face. A civilian advisor walked beside him. The Empire is collapsing faster than expected. Elias looked through the glass. There is nothing to celebrate. The advisor frowned. They attacked us. They humiliated you. They started this war. Elias nodded slowly. Yes. But every destroyed family belongs to the future. The advisor remained quiet. Elias continued, if hatred decides our actions, this war never truly ends. Hours later, Commander Varkon received another report. This one changed everything. The communications officer looked terrified. Commander, our outer defense stations have surrendered. Varkon's eyes widened. They weren't attacked. No. They surrendered because... The officer swallowed hard. They've run out of food. The room became completely silent. Not defeated. Not destroyed. Simply unable to continue. Varkon slowly looked at the giant map covering the bridge wall. Every minute another Imperial system changed color. Not because humanity conquered it, because it could no longer support itself. The Empire wasn't collapsing under enemy fire. It was collapsing under the weight of its own dependence. For the first time, Commander Varkon understood the true battlefield. Humanity had never been fighting his fleets. They had been fighting time itself. Was winning. Commander Varkon had not slept for 3 days. The lights on the bridge of his flagship never dimmed anymore. Emergency alarms echoed every few minutes. Officers rushed from one station to another, carrying reports that all sounded the same. Another fleet had gone silent. Another colony had surrendered. Another supply route had disappeared. The Empire was still alive. But it was no longer moving. Varkon stood in front of the giant observation window. Thousands of stars filled the darkness beyond the glass. Somewhere among them, human fleets waited patiently. They did not chase him. They did not taunt him. They simply watched. For the first time in his military career, silence felt more dangerous than weapons. Behind him, Marshal Korvac approached carefully. Commander. Varkon did not turn around. What now? Korvac handed him a data tablet. Our reserve fleet has reached the Cronies sector. Varkon finally looked at the report. Good. Korvac remained silent. After a few seconds, he quietly added, They found nothing. Varkon frowned. What do you mean? The human fleet disappeared before our ships arrived. Another officer joined them. They're doing it again. Varkon looked confused. What? They attack our supplies. And leave before we arrive. The commander clenched his fists. They refuse every battle. Korvac answered calmly. No. They refuse battles they don't need. Far across the galaxy, Captain Elias Ward stood inside humanity's Strategic Operations Center. The room was surprisingly quiet. Dozens of officers studied floating maps, but nobody raised their voice. Every movement had already been planned years ago. Admiral Sophia Kane walked toward Elias. The Empire has begun gathering every remaining battleship. Elias nodded. They're desperate. Sophia enlarged a holographic map. Thousands of red symbols slowly moved toward one location. Their entire navy is forming one final strike force. A young analyst looked worried. That's almost 12,000 warships. Another officer whispered, the largest fleet in galactic history. The room became silent. Finally, Elias spoke. They've chosen one last gamble. Sophia looked at him. And us. Elias folded his hands behind his back. We'll give them one last chance. Several hours later, every communication system inside the Empire received the same transmission. The image of Captain Elias appeared. His voice was calm. This message is for Commander Varkan. Across thousands of ships, soldiers stopped working. Every screen displayed the human officer. Elias continued. The war has reached its end. We offer one final opportunity. Withdraw every fleet. Release every occupied human colony. Accept responsibility for violating diplomatic law. If you do, the war ends today. The message ended. Silence followed. Inside Varkan's flagship, every officer looked toward their commander. No one spoke. Korvac finally broke the silence. We should accept. Another general nodded. We've already lost. A younger officer slammed his fist against the table. We still have thousands of ships. Korvac looked directly at him. And enough fuel for one battle. The room became quiet again. Every officer knew he was right. Varkan slowly walked toward the command table. His eyes burned with anger. I built this empire. No human will force me to kneel. Korvac lowered his head. Then many more will die. Varkan looked around the bridge. No. They will win. But I will never surrender. 20 hours later, the largest fleet ever assembled entered the empty Hades corridor. Thousands of Imperial battleships stretched across the stars. Their engines glowed like rivers of fire. Every remaining elite commander had gathered there. Varkan stood proudly on the bridge. This battle decides everything. His officers nodded. The sensors activated. One signal appeared. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, the display filled with blue lights. Human ships. Thousands of them. Not attacking. Waiting. Perfectly positioned around the Imperial fleet. An officer whispered, "They surrounded us." Before we even arrived. The bridge became completely silent. No one understood how. A communication request appeared. Varkan accepted it. Captain Elias appeared once again. His expression had not changed. "Commander." Varkan crossed his arms. "So, this is your victory." Elias slowly shook his head. "There has never been victory here. There has only been loss." Varkan laughed bitterly. "You sound disappointed." "I am. You've trapped me. You trapped yourself." The commander looked through the bridge window. Human warships remained perfectly still. None fired. None advanced. Finally, Varkan asked, "Why aren't you attacking?" Elias answered immediately, "Because you no longer have a way to continue." The commander looked confused. "Our sensors show your fuel reserves. Your ammunition. Your damaged engines. You cannot reach Earth. You cannot return home. You cannot protect your colonies. You cannot even supply this fleet." The bridge officers checked their own systems. Everything Elias said was true. One engineer quietly spoke. "Commander, our fuel reserve has fallen below emergency levels." Another officer added, "Our life support reserves will last only 6 days." Varkan's shoulders slowly lowered. For the first time, he truly understood. Humanity had defeated him before this fleet had even arrived. Several long minutes passed. Nobody moved. Commander Varkan removed his ceremonial command crest. It was a symbol every Imperial commander carried. He looked at it silently. The medal represented 50 years of victories. 50 years of conquered worlds. 50 years of absolute confidence. He slowly placed it on the command table. The sound echoed across the bridge. His voice almost failed. "Have lost." No officer argued. No one could. The battle had ended without a single shot. Hours later, Imperial warships powered down their weapons. One by one, thousands of ships transmitted surrender codes. Across the galaxy, military broadcasts carried the unbelievable images. The greatest empire in known history had surrendered, not because every ship had been destroyed, but because every choice had disappeared. Commander Varkan stepped onto a neutral space station. Waiting for him stood Captain Elias Ward. Only 2 human security officers stood nearby. No chains. No army. No celebration. Varkan looked directly at the man he had struck days earlier. I expected soldiers. Elias quietly answered. You came to surrender, not to be humiliated. Varkan stared at him. You still treat me with respect. You started this war. Elias nodded. Yes. But ending it with revenge would only begin another. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Finally, Varkan slowly lowered his head. It was the first time in his entire life that he had bowed to another leader. Not because he had been forced, but because he had finally understood the difference between power and honor. The entire galaxy watched the moment live, and millions realized that humanity's greatest strength had never been its fleets. It had always been the discipline to stop fighting the moment peace became possible. The surrender spread across the galaxy in less than 1 hour. Every news station interrupted its normal broadcasts. Every military network stopped regular communications. Every public screen displayed the same unbelievable image. Commander Varkan, the most feared military leader in the galaxy, had surrendered his fleet. Not after a bloody final battle. Not after the destruction of his flagship. But after realizing that every path to victory had quietly disappeared. For many people, it did not seem possible. For others, it was the beginning of a completely different galaxy. On the neutral station known as Haven Point, thousands of cameras floated through the air. Representatives from hundreds of civilizations gathered inside the enormous treaty chamber. The room looked very different from the Grand Council Hall where the war had begun. There were no cheers. No celebrations. No banners declaring victory. Only silence. Captain Elias Ward walked into the chamber wearing the same simple Navy uniform. The bruise on his face had almost healed. It remained visible enough to remind everyone how this war had started. One strike. One moment of pride. One terrible mistake. Across the room, Commander Varkan entered without his black armor. For the first time in decades, he wore only a plain military uniform. Without the armor, he looked older. More tired. The proud commander who once believed nothing could challenge his empire seemed to have disappeared. The entire chamber watched as the two men faced each other once again. This time, no guard stood between them. No weapons pointed at anyone. Only history waited. The chief council judge activated the treaty table. A blue hologram appeared above it. The conflict officially known as the Human Imperial War is now ready for final resolution. He looked toward Varkan. Commander, do you accept responsibility for violating protected diplomatic law and beginning an illegal war? The room became completely silent. Millions of viewers across the galaxy held their breath. Varkan closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, the anger was gone. I do. The judge nodded. Do you accept the surrender terms? I do. And do you recognize Earth's diplomatic sovereignty under galactic law? Varkan slowly looked toward Elias. I do. The hologram turned green. The war was officially over. Many expected Captain Elias to demand punishment. Many expected him to ask for reparations. Others believed he would demand the Empire's complete destruction. Instead, he surprised everyone. The Human Federation requests only 3 conditions. The judge looked toward him. State them. Elias spoke clearly. First, every occupied human colony will be returned immediately. The judge nodded. Accepted. Second, every civilian prisoner from every species will be released. Several ambassadors looked surprised. Every species? One whispered. Elias continued. War should never imprison innocent people. The judge smiled slightly. Accepted. Elias paused before speaking his final condition. The Empire will rebuild every world damaged by this conflict. Varkan frowned. You expect us to rebuild human worlds? Elias quietly shook his head. No. Every world. The commander looked confused. Even those belonging to our allies? Yes. Even neutral planets? Yes. Even imperial colonies damaged by your own mistakes? Elias nodded. Every child deserves a future. Silence filled the chamber. Several ambassadors slowly stood. None of them had expected such an answer. Humanity had won. Yet it demanded rebuilding instead of revenge. Months passed. The galaxy slowly recovered. Trade routes reopened. Medical ships traveled freely between former enemies. Destroyed stations were repaired. Farmers returned to abandoned colonies. Children once again played beneath peaceful skies. Human engineers worked beside Imperial workers. Former enemies built hospitals together. They repaired schools together. They even rebuilt spaceports together. One elderly Imperial worker looked toward a human engineer. "I fought against your people." The engineer smiled while tightening a steel support beam. "I know. You should hate me." The human handed him another tool. "Hate doesn't repair buildings." The old worker looked away. For the first time in years, he smiled. Back inside the Galactic Council, a new proposal appeared before every representative. Its title read, The Alliance Accord. The document completely changed diplomatic law. From that day forward, every official peace envoy, regardless of species, would receive absolute legal protection. Any attack against a diplomatic representative would immediately trigger investigation by the entire Galactic Council. No empire, no king, no commander would ever again be allowed to treat peace negotiations as a place for violence. The proposal passed without a single vote against it. History had taught the galaxy an unforgettable lesson. Commander Varkon resigned from military service. Many expected him to disappear into history. Instead, he accepted responsibility for rebuilding the worlds damaged by his decisions. Every morning, he visited construction sites instead of military bases. He helped rebuild cities he had once planned to conquer. One young journalist finally asked him, "Commander, what was your greatest mistake?" Varkon remained quiet for several seconds. Finally, he answered, "I believed strength meant making others fear me." He looked toward workers from many different species rebuilding a hospital together. "The humans taught me something stronger." "What?" "Making others trust you." Captain Elias refused every medal offered to him. He declined statues. He declined titles. He even refused promotion. When reporters asked why, he smiled gently. "A soldier's greatest victory is returning home before another generation has to fight." Soon afterward, he quietly returned to active service. His name slowly became a legend, not because he defeated an empire, but because he never allowed pride to guide his decisions. Years later, a class of young cadets visited the restored Grand Council Hall. Their instructor pointed toward a small mark still visible on the polished floor. No one had repaired it. A student raised her hand. "What happened there?" The old instructor smiled. "That is where one arrogant strike changed the galaxy." Another student asked, "Is it true that one human defeated an empire?" The instructor slowly shook his head. "No. One human offered peace. The empire defeated itself when it rejected that peace." The students looked at the mark in silence. Above them, carved into the white stone wall, were words added after the war ended. "Power may begin a war. Wisdom decides how it ends." The room became quiet. Far above the council hall, hundreds of ships from different civilizations crossed the stars together. Not as enemies, not as rivals, but as partners protecting the peace they had nearly lost. And throughout the galaxy, every military academy taught the same lesson to every future commander. Never mistake a calm human for a weak one. And never raise your hand against the one who still offers you peace.